um, I'm creating this channel and recording these videos so that I can look back on my life at some point. I'm also creating them because I've realized that speaking helps me to think, and however much other people aren't always reliable or don't always have the time to discuss with me all of my thoughts, I can always talk to myself and record myself. I think in this way, I can more effectively scrutinize my ideas. And that's the goal. There's the old, I'm a student of philosophy. I read a lot of philosophy. And in ancient Greece, all of philosophy was generally written as dialogues, because philosophy is not something that is sure. If you were to write a philosophical book, it would always become out of date. It would always be obsolete, simply because there is no true understanding. There is no complete understanding, at least not one which we have reached yet, or I don't believe it's one that I will reach, or my lifetime human beings will really reach. So, dialogues are a way to continue to scrutinize your ideas. And so that's why I'm doing this, to scrutinize my own ideas, to look back on them and to say, that was pretty stupid, or, you know, sometimes you have your moments. um, I want to start, I think, with meaning. Meaning is something a lot of the books I've read talk about. Viktor Frankl, obviously, writing one of the most well-known books about meaning, Man's Search for Meaning, where he outlines the necessity for meaning, the necessity for meaning in life. And I can't agree with that more, of course, that meaning is needed in order for you to desire to continue to live, for you to truly achieve anything. You must have some sort of meaning. You must figure out that meaning. Base meaning comes from this need to survive. This need to survive. And as we achieve that meaning, the evolutionary goal, or the goal of the human, should be to search for another meaning, which can then continue to give you purpose, can continue to give you a focus, to give you a reason to push yourself. I believe human beings were created not only to live, but to improve our world, to improve the world for the other human beings. Marcus Aurelius talks about this moment where he's under the sheets of his bed and he's warm. And he says, in the morning, have this thought ready. To ask yourself, is this what I was created for? when you're sitting there and you're warm, and the cold is outside of the sheets, right? You have to make the choice to move from the warmth, move from the safety into the coldness of the rest of the world. And you ask yourself, am I created to be under these sheets? And the answer is, of course, no. A human being isn't created simply to stay safe, simply to be warm, to be fed. It's not why we have been created. Human beings have been created and have a natural need and desire to achieve, to do something more, to push further, to take risks. We live in a world today where risk, true risk of your life, of your livelihood, it doesn't exist to the extent to which it has for 99% of human existence. In the last 50 years, our lives, human beings, have just become far more survivable. It's been far more difficult to die. And yet, because of those thousands of years where life was so difficult, where life was on this edge of non-existence, we still have the natural instincts within us to preserve our own life. We still have these things like anxiety, which are intended to keep us safe. Things like anger, which are intended to keep us alive. And for thousands of years, they have served that purpose. That is why we have evolved in this way. That is why we are the people we are today. That's why it exists, right? If anxiety wasn't better for those human beings 1,000 years ago, then they would have not been able to reproduce. But they were the ones who were able to reproduce. You know, there's the idea that we were all ancestors of the most scared person. Right? Out of the 100 people, we were the most scared. We were all the most scared because we were the ones who survived. So it must take a conscious effort today to not be scared. To look at your life and say, am I truly in danger? What does this danger constitute? What am I afraid of? Fear and anger and sadness, they all have a meaning. And so when you're faced with these things, you must ask yourself, why? Why in this moment am I fearful? And you must scrutinize as well. You must ask, why is this fear correct? Why is this fear warranted? Why should I be scared? Should I be scared? What does it mean if I fail? What does it mean if my fears are realized? There's the idea and the reality that our human evolution and technological evolution as well is logarithmic. And it goes like this. And the idea is hopefully that we are somewhere around here. And we're not all the way up, but we are starting to ascend at a far faster rate than any time in human history. And so to do that, we need to be conscious of our fear, of the basic things that drive us. And we need to try somehow to catch up with the technological advances. It's interesting. In this moment where there is silence, was there discomfort? When I was speaking before, did I not understand? Right, there's this anxiety. And so in this moment, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna scrutinize that anxiety I felt. In reality, what's the worst that would have happened? Right? And that's like sort of thinking is good. I think thinking, what is the worst that can happen? What's the worst that could happen? I think often gives us a reprieve from the anxiety, a reprieve from this fear. But I think a better question is, what will happen? What do I truly think is going to happen? I have this idea, this thought, which I've been creating, or I have been coming up with. It's the idea that all moments lead to the next, that no matter what, each action has a reaction. No matter what. And so, just as a stone being dropped can only fall one way, when taking into account all of the variables that are affecting it, your life can only end one way when you take into account all of the variables that are put into it. And you may say, this creates meaninglessness if everything is predetermined. No. This is why I brought up meaning before. Because Viktor Frankl explains how important meaning is in human beings. And yet he does not tell us how we are to gain that meaning. How we are to find that meaning. And this is how. By looking at who has affected us, looking at what has affected us, looking at the things that have created this moment in time for your life. Right, just like the stone. just like a waterfall. It's my favorite. It looks like it's angry and it's random and it's chaos. But as the water started to flow, there was only ever one way it could go. There was only ever one path. And so, if we look at the variables affecting your life, the things that have led you up to this moment, you can see that there's only one way forward. It's difficult to find your purpose. Some people believe they're destined for more than what they have been given, more than where they are now. Some people simply want to be part of a larger whole, want to feel as if they belong. There's the idea in Abstraction and Empathy, a very interesting book, that it's the idea that we find beauty in what we lack. That we find beauty in what we lack. That's why taste changes. In times of disorder, we find beauty in order and simplicity. Times of order and constraint, we find beauty in release. We find beauty in the chaos. And so in our lives, we will be led often to what we lacked, to desire what we lacked. Now, you may say that there's these people who have difficult upbringings. Will then have difficult lives. What you find that often that is the case. Because there's a reality to our world. And I'm only saying these words because it's how we understand it. That in reality, those words, right? In reality, our world is like this. That's how someone like Camus comes up with absurdism, because there's the thought of how our world is, but in reality it's not like that. But I will say, in truth, stuff isn't always good, or what we think of as good. But as the stone falls, so does our universe, so does time, so does all of our lives. All of our lives fall together and create what we experience as the world. One man once said that the arc of the universe is long, but that it tends towards justice. That's what I believe. I believe that all of our human lives are falling together. That there is an end. That there's tomorrow. And I believe that within us, we all want to live better, and that we all understand to some level that that better comes from being kind to each other, from being good to one another. And so we must do these things. In the end, we all must understand that we are insignificant in comparison to the grand plan, the grand thread of fate that is our universe, and yet we all play a role in this cascade, and we must understand that and look within ourselves and look to what we feel and try to find what part we are supposed to play. Because in that part, we will find the most meaning. We will find the most purpose. It won't always happen. But even if you don't end up being part of what you were supposed to, what you could have been, you are still part of the larger whole and leading and affecting our world in some way, whether ambivalent, whether it's nothing that you change in our world, whether it's negative, whether it's positive. In the end, you affect our world. And so, our goal should simply be to be positive, to push our world closer to the ultimate good, the ultimate better world, which I know will happen, and it will happen, and it will happen. This is a sacrifice all of us in history must make. All of those who die, for terrible reasons, for nothing. All of us will grow old and perish. That's the sacrifice. It is understanding that you have to keep going for the better world. You have to keep pushing for it. Keep taking our world as it is and looking for improvement. You're not trying to understand the perfect world and suddenly create it today. It's not how it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen through improvement every day, every century. That's how it's going to happen. That's how it must happen. Reminds me of my My favorite speech by Martin Luther King. My favorite speech ever, but by Martin Luther King. Where he says, I've been to the mountaintop, and mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He says he doesn't know if he's going to get there with us, but he knows that he will get there someday. That's what our lives are for, to create the promised land. Create a better world. So hopefully, the next generation after ours have better lives. So hopefully, the century after ours will see a better world. That's all we can do. That's all humans have ever tried to do, ever really done. A lot of the bad that we see in our world is caused simply by people giving in to these emotions which were meant to keep us alive. I believe that our better world is one in which we move further or rather, we understand deeper these emotions. That we are more cognitively aware of these emotions on an individual basis. That each individual human being is. And I believe that we are today. Meaning is difficult. Meaning is difficult.